right. Happy weekend, peoples. It is Sunday morning in the US. So let's get started on my KURV YIELDMAX comparison analysis. Okay, I'll just jump right in. So it's easy when you kind of have apples and apples versus apples and oranges, right? If I go look at some fund and I say, hey, YieldMax is paying a higher yield, but they're not even have the same underlying. If they're an S&P 500 or they're a NASDAQ 100, then those are, you can still compare, right? You can look at NAV reduction and you can look at total yield and total NAV reduction, add those together. And as you guys know by now, I call it total return. And some people poo poo, oh, well, I care more about this or I care more about that. But the reality is, your total return is truth. You can lie to yourself, you can tell yourself whatever you want, but it's reality. So I'm not here to defend it. I'm just telling you, I'll always track it, I'll always say it's truth, and you can do whatever you want to do in your own head to make yourself believe. I will acknowledge that if I'm getting big dividends 3 to 1 in one fund versus the other, and I'm doing more things with that money, that's an advantage. But if you tell me at the end of the year I made, 70% yield, but I had a 60% NAV reduction, then you really only had a 10% yield. You just utilized that yield, that 70% yield along the way, but your account's down. Maybe your margin borrowing is less based on that, right? There's all kinds of things that come into play. Um, Also, as ETFs go down in value, oftentimes they'll raise it. They also raise when stocks are running very, very strong and there's a high IV, the implied volatility, right? They'll raise margin on your Misties, your other big stocks like that, even though they're doing great and the NAV's up and the dividends big, but they'll raise the margin on you. I mean, I played the futures market for 10 years and retired from that in the metals market. And it always happens. If they want to stop the FOMOing into gold, they just say, oh, it's no longer 8,000 per gold contract, it's 11,000. Sometimes it's not even rational that they raised it. It's another way of Big Brother controlling the market. And I know a lot of you know that. Just go look around in the retail brokerages, why is this one lower margin than that one? And why did they raise Amazon in this brokerage, but not in this brokerage, right? It's 30% or it's 50% or whatever. Anybody who is knowledgeable in the market begins to understand it and do correlation. It's why I'm doing these correlations for you guys. So, with that said, continuing. So, as I said, easier. Here is KURV on their 6 funds that YieldMax has. Now, I'll give YieldMax credit over on, I hate their YBID, I don't like their GDXY, and yet I love both of those categories. But I do like where you can just take 6 of the Mag 6, if you will, 6 out of the Mag 7, and compare them. Otherwise, I love that YieldMax goes out and has Misty and Coney, and they have some stocks. But for me personally, and I've said that to a lot of people, I don't even play those as income funds anymore. I go over and I go to Defiance's 2X MSTX when MicroStrategy's running. Why do I want to be in Misty and pick up pennies when I can pick up dollars in MSTX? It's as simple as that. I get it. Some people need it. So I'm just speaking from truth and things that I do. My truth may not be your truth, but anybody who tells me total return doesn't matter, you've just categorized yourself as not truly understanding. You may have other rationale. Okay, so let's go through these. Up here, I have dates, approximate prices when they distributed their dividend. Now, granted, YIELDMAX is using slightly different dates now across these funds since they have groups, but it all still works. And then for my annual, I went out and did a 12-month to 12-month and used the exact same dates. So without getting into all of the detail, let's get into the comparison and I'll explain what's behind it. Because that's what this is. It's comparing, do I want to be in YIELDMAX or do I want to be in KURV if I'm chasing income on these 6 funds? Well, I can tell you right now, it depends on which fund you're in. But in general, very specifically, KURV does a lot better with holding its NAV. Okay, it's going to hold the stock price much, much better. YIELDMAX almost always pays a higher dividend. So that's where total return comes into play. And so I thought on this scenario, obviously I'd take like funds. For me, I love BTC. I love MicroStrategy. I like Coinbase. I love Tesla. I don't own any Tesla. Why? Because YIELDMAX is not the place to own anything to do with Tesla. Go out and buy a 2X when it's running, buy the stock itself, okay? And if you want to do income, get KURV. No, look at this. Here's a 3-month comparison, all right? For whatever reason, I get it when there were stock splits. This isn't even, well, you may have a stock split in Tesla, but there are no underlying during this 3, 6 months, and 12 months. There are no underlying splits on Tesla. Okay. So I take that right out of the air. So on KURV, they had over the last 3 months 19.91% gain in their Tesla income fund, just in the NAV, okay? And YIELDMAX had a 7% drop. Okay, now in yield, it's almost 3 to 1. Well, you know where a lot of the drop is coming because they're paying you and you have to reduce it that much, right? But look at this total return for the last 3 months, 2677. That's real, people. 10% is real, right? Because I've got 18, I've got to take away the drop in value, right, of Tesla at 7%. So I end up with 10.6. So I've got a greater than 2 to 1. Better, and so I put my little check marks out here, and you can go. And so going across on Tesla, or sorry, this category is Tesla, right? We all understand that they both are writing options on Tesla in order to show income. And then the only other thing is, well, is my underlying dropping down? Or, I mean, it says a lot when YIELDMAX says, well, we're going to start all new funds at $50. I can tell you why they did that. Because at 20, they're going to have to split the stock every year or so on some of these. And they do better jobs on some stocks than others, just the nature of the beast. That's why I'm saying if you want to play Microsoft, the last one on the list, and you want income, you're better off. Okay, and this is the only one that's the case in all 3 categories: 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. You got a better total return. Okay, this one, 6 months, is a negative, but this is a bigger negative, right? So you're always, your yield is what's winning for you here in Microsoft. So if you're in MSFO, don't go get KURV's MSFY, right? Because you're going to get a better deal in YIELDMAX's total return. What I did over here is I'm showing you, I picked these dates, right? Just for the 12-month. Otherwise, I went back and said, okay, 3 payments. What was the price of the fund back on the declaration day back when they were getting ready to pay for the month. So I had a 3-month comparison, a 6-month comparison, and a 12-month comparison. And I'm showing you the prices here on the 12 months. But in all my tables, I go out here and I have all the dividends for the last 11 payments. And then I even went in and calculated the 12th month payment. Or sorry, yeah, the 12-month payment, December of last year and November of this year to get my 12-month comparison. So let's continue on that. So on Tesla, there's a win every time, right? So they had a 39% NAV over the last 6 months increase, and they're paying a 15% dividend. They had a 19 here, almost 20, and a 6. So their total return was, this is a nice dividend, 18%. This is a great dividend, 32% over 6 months, right? These aren't annualized, these are just calculated at, obviously the 12-month is an annualized number by its very nature of it. But I could have gone in and done that as well. But you have a total return of 54% versus 13% because they had an 18% loss, right? And then a 31% loss. Now, I think Tesla split here somewhere, but still, I'm using the charts. All you have to do, here's another thing that I typically do. I will go out here and I'll take a look at Tesla. Okay. You can't see this, but I'm going to show you when I finish it. So if I go into Tesla on a chart, I can do 6 months and I get an advanced chart. And then the other one that I want to compare to is test TSLP, right? And then it changes it into percentage gains, right? So your first one, the black one, is Tesla. And you just see how it outperforms in this period of time. We're up here at a plus 40% gain. This is not dividends. This is just the fun. And this is like barely break even, right? And so there's where your scenarios come into play. So if you want to see the data as well, I'm actually using different prices, but I wanted you to know I'm not fabricating this. I'm not making any of this. And then obviously I'm using KURV's distributions and I'm using YIELDMAX distributions. So all of this data is there. And so is, again, it's apples and apples because it's the same funds, right? So you have Neos doing the options and you have Jay at Zega doing them and his team for the others. So whatever is happening, this got a little closer over the 12 months, but still 24 to 14, right? Almost double. So even with a 45% dividend yield, right? You're still getting a 23% dividend yield, and you got a little bit of a NAV gain over all of that period of time. But you've got a big NAV gain here over the entire time. So I just think it's wise to put your money where it's best served, right? The old adage, where do you want to invest? Whoever takes the best care of your money. To me, the best care is who gives me the best total return. So I'm not going to do every one, but there are some that YIELDMAX wins. This one is a nice win here, but look what happens. We get a 31 to 20% total yield or total return over 3 months. 6 months, they're still winning, but it's to a 5%. And by the time I get to a year, I've got a 4% better gain. So this one would be a toss up, right? They both do, in this case, they're both doing very well. It's got a 30% NAV increase. This one's got a 22, almost 23% yield. It's got a 40, almost 48%, right? This is more than doubling in your yield payment, but you're still ahead of the game when you look at your stock price, right? Which you have to. I mean, it's value, right? You could sell it. So I say if you don't want to pay income, right, and that additional you're getting in a taxable account, you're getting smaller yield along the way. You still have to pay taxes on this, and then just wait till your 13th month you've owned it and sell it, okay? And you get that, and I think you have to wait 30 days with the way it works on, I forget what you call that, but basically to avoid not having the capital gain, right? It's a calculation that the IRS does. They say if you sell something and you buy the same, thing back in the same quantity within 30 days, then you lose the value of that long-term capital gain. So anyway, this is interesting data, no doubt. So in this next one, very similar. YIELDMAX won on the 30 and 60 day, not by a huge amount, right? It's rare when you see KURV lose and drop their NAV. It only shows up here, I think, it's showing up a few times, but not very many. It's the exception rather than the rule. Maybe 1/5 of all these things do you have a loss in the NAV, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, right? So it shows up here in Apple, and it looks to me like even though they win, they being KURV 13% total return to 11, that's close enough. If you say, hey, Bruce, I like having the bigger yield and I'm using that yield, I'm reinvesting, whatever you want to say, then I get it, right? That's the purpose of this, is to give you the data and let you decide, especially you guys with experience. People that are naive Nellies, right, that just chase yield completely and don't really understand anything, then you can look at these. All right. So on Google, and it's Goop and Gooey, right? For whatever reason, I remember doing this a number of months after I interviewed Howard Chan. That one stuck out. I mean, it. This is not a. This is a closer game at 5% to 3%, but we win every time at KURV, right? This is a massive win. Look on the yearly basis. You got a stock price of eight. It starts at 1897 back a year ago, and it's 1432 right now. You go from 26 here to 27. So you have so there's a 26% change. So the fact that 26 to 14, it just doesn't help you get there, right? Oh, sorry guys, this red should be green. Okay. But 17% total return to 1.85, that's a clear winner, and has been if you go back for 2 years, right? So on Amazon, it barely won here, and it won at the 6 month mark and at the 12-month mark, but they had a nice win here over the last 3 or 4 months in AMC at YIELDMAX. And like I said, on the last one, Microsoft is an obvious one there. So very interesting. To me, the best paying and performing fund almost on both sides is Netflix. I'm pretty bullish in general on Netflix. Um, but again, if I was gonna do income only, I probably would pick Netflix. I wouldn't touch Palantir. I wouldn't touch MSTR. Most of these, either in YIELDMAX or even if they had one in KURV, because I just like buying the stock, holding it for a little while when it's running, and selling it. Again, I make dollars while you make pennies on that scenario. I think I had a 3-day double on MSTX. and I missed some. You know, I flew from 40 to 90, um, and then it went to 140. I think I bought back around 83 and sold out at 140, and the thing went higher than that. I'm not even sure where it's in. I got I got chicken on that one. I just wanted to keep my money. Yeah, there's the chart. So when this thing flew, and I didn't even buy. I had already, all of my long-term cycle work said that Trump was going to win in a landslide, and I pretty much knew that was going to be positive, but I didn't play my own advice. I waited 3 or 4 days, um, and got in the stock, not right after the election night or the next day, which I really should have, based on what my cycle guys were saying in terms of Trump winning on a landslide. I mean, they were saying that 6 or 8 months ago, but I don't generally talk politics, right? The bad thing of that, if you have a YouTube channel, unless you got a million viewers and you're all on one side, you get out and start hammering one side or the other and you lose half the audience. But the reality, that half the audience was about 60%. You could see it as the votes came out. But anyway, I don't, to me, this is all about finance, not about politics. Um, all right, guys. So that's what I got for you on KURV and that. Anything you want to see me do, I'm going to start doing Roundhill versus YIELDMAX since, but there's really three funds there, right? The Russell, the Nasdaq 100, and the S&P. Um, and there'll be more players there on the weeklies. All right, guys, that's what I got for you. Again, this is Bruce with Targeted Wealth Creation. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Have a great one. Bye for now.